Nobody saw this coming, not the fans, not the media, not even the league offices that think they've seen everything. One quiet moment behind closed doors revealed something the NFL wasn't ready for, and once it surfaced, it sent shockwaves through the entire sport. A father stood alone, overwhelmed, not by pressure, not by criticism, but by the weight of everything it took to reach this moment. Years of sacrifice, years of restraint, years of watching things happen that the public will never fully understand, and now suddenly the league was staring at a situation no one could have predicted. Because this wasn't just about a rookie stepping onto an NFL field. It wasn't just about a proud dad watching his son live out a dream. It was about a franchise so desperate for belief that it started considering a move so bold, so unconventional that other teams were left scrambling to process it. While the rest of the football world was distracted by playoff races and coaching rumors, something far bigger was quietly taking shape. An idea that challenges how teams hire coaches, how quarterbacks are developed, and whether family legacy has a place at the highest level of professional sports. Whispers started circulating, front offices took notice, and suddenly a name that already dominates headlines was being linked to a future that could completely rewrite the rules. Was this brilliance or desperation? And more importantly, was the NFL prepared for what might happen next? Because once you understand what unfolded on that field and what was being discussed behind closed doors, it becomes clear this story isn't just about football anymore. And it's only just beginning. The moment that set everything in motion didn't feel historic at first. It felt chaotic. Another messy afternoon for a franchise that's lived inside chaos for decades. Cleveland was grinding through yet another tight game, trying to survive another season that never fully came together. Then everything shifted in seconds. The starting quarterback went down hard. No warning, no buildup, just one hit that immediately sent him into concussion protocol. The sidelines stiffened, coaches scrambled, and suddenly the name at the bottom of the depth chart was being called. A rookie, a fifth-round pick, a player most fans barely expected to see this season. Shedeur Sanders. There was no time to settle in, no scripted drives, no easing into the speed of the NFL. One snap and the weight of an entire organization landed on his shoulders. The stadium buzzed, half curious, half skeptical. This wasn't supposed to be the moment, not like this. Across the country, his father heard the news while doing what he always does, working, teaching, building. But when word reached him that his son was stepping onto an NFL field for the first time, everything stopped. The confidence, the armor, the image people think they know. It cracked. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't Coach Prime. He wasn't the Hall of Famer. He was just a father watching years of sacrifice collide with reality. The emotion hit so hard he couldn't even speak. This wasn't about stats or draft position. This was about survival, about making it through storms no one else saw. On the field, the rookie struggled. The numbers weren't pretty. The defense showed him no mercy. He threw an interception, drives stalled, and critics were already sharpening their knives. But the box score didn't tell the real story. He didn't panic. He didn't shrink. And he didn't look overwhelmed by the moment. Thrown into chaos with no preparation, he stood upright. He read coverages. He took hits. He got back up. For a player many wrote off before he ever took a snap, just holding steady mattered more than anything else. And while fans debated his performance, something far more important was happening far away from the field. Because what happened that Sunday wasn't the real story. The real story was what Cleveland started discussing once the game ended. While fans were locked into post-game reactions and arguing over missed throws, the real tension wasn't on the field anymore. It was inside offices most people never see, quiet conversations, phone calls that didn't make headlines, and leaks that sounded too wild to take seriously until they kept coming. According to reports and league whispers, Cleveland's front office wasn't just evaluating a rookie quarterback. They were questioning everything: the coaching structure, the long-term plan, even the way the organization thinks about leadership itself. And that's when one name started surfacing in discussions that were never meant to go public. Deion Sanders. Not as a consultant, not as a symbolic hire, but as a full-scale solution. Sources claim the Browns began exploring a move so aggressive it left other front offices stunned. We're talking about a potential offer that would place Deion among the highest paid coaches in NFL history, not because of nostalgia, not because of hype, but because Cleveland believes this isn't a normal coaching hire, it's a total organizational reset. The rumored package goes far beyond a paycheck: full authority over football operations, final say on personnel, control over the draft room, the power to rebuild the franchise around one unified vision. And at the center of that vision sits a quarterback the organization suddenly sees very differently: his son. At first glance, it sounds like clickbait, another internet rumor designed to stir chaos during a slow news cycle. But the timing matters. Cleveland is unraveling, coaching stability is slipping, confidence inside the building is eroding, and the quarterback position once again feels like a dead end. They've tried veterans, they've tried high draft picks, they've tried safe solutions, and nothing stuck. What they need now isn't just a coach or a quarterback. They need belief, they need relevance, they need something powerful enough to cut through years of failure and put Cleveland back into the national conversation. And like it or not, there may be no figure in football more capable of doing that instantly than Deion Sanders. Love him or hate him, he changes the temperature of every room he walks into. Every press conference trends, every game becomes must-watch. And if Cleveland truly believes they've stumbled into a quarterback worth building around, the idea of pairing him with the one person who understands him better than anyone else starts to feel inevitable. But that opens a door the NFL has never walked through before. And once it's opened, there's no closing it again. To understand why Cleveland would even entertain something this extreme, you have to understand the kind of desperation that builds quietly over years. Not the loud kind fans argue about online, but the internal exhaustion that settles inside a franchise when nothing ever sticks. This organization has tried everything. They've chased stability with safe coaching hires, they've gambled on bold quarterback picks, they've handed the keys to veterans who were supposed to fix everything overnight. Each time the story ended the same way: another reset, another explanation, another promise that next year would be different. And year after year it was. At some point, failure stops feeling surprising and starts feeling inevitable. That's where Cleveland is now. Inside the building, belief has worn thin, coaches feel the pressure, executives feel the clock ticking, and ownership knows that doing the same thing again isn't just risky, it's pointless. This isn't a team looking for a clever schematic upgrade. They're looking for a shock to the system. Someone who doesn't just coach plays but changes how the franchise is perceived from the outside and experienced from the inside. Someone who forces alignment instead of fighting politics. Someone who can command attention, demand accountability, and rebuild belief in a place that hasn't felt hopeful in a very long time. That's where this idea stops sounding reckless and starts sounding intentional. Because Deion Sanders doesn't arrive quietly, he doesn't blend in. He doesn't wait for permission. Wherever he goes, the conversation changes immediately. Players listen. Media swarms, expectations rise, and suddenly losing feels unacceptable instead of expected. Cleveland doesn't just want wins, they want relevance. They want fans to feel something again. They want players to believe the organization knows where it's going. And they want the rest of the league to stop treating them like a punchline. Hearing a traditional coach won't do that. Drafting another quarterback won't do that, but a move that rewrites the rules, that forces everyone to pay attention. That's the gamble. Because if you're already failing quietly, the only thing worse is continuing to fail invisibly. At least a move like this gives the franchise a clear identity, a clear direction, a reason for players to buy in and for fans to believe something different is finally happening. But belief comes with consequences. Once you make a move this loud, there's no hiding, no patience, no excuses. Every win feels amplified, every mistake feels catastrophic, and if it collapses, it doesn't just fail, it becomes a warning story for the entire league. That's the line Cleveland is standing on right now. And the next step could change everything. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, not because it's impossible, but because it challenges an unwritten rule the NFL has protected for decades. Family and football are supposed to stay separate at this level. Bloodlines end at the door, merit rules everything, or at least that's the idea. A father coaching his son in the NFL would shatter that illusion instantly. Every decision would be questioned, every snap dissected, every interception turned into a debate about favoritism instead of performance. The word nepotism wouldn't just appear, it would dominate every headline, every debate show, every comment section. And Deion Sanders knows that better than anyone. He's already lived a version of this at the college level. He's already coached his sons under the brightest lights with critics waiting for a misstep. And instead of dodging the pressure, he confronted it head-on. He's been clear about the line he draws. Before the game, he's a father. Once the whistle blows, he's just a coach. No exceptions, no shortcuts. That sounds simple, it is. In the NFL, the pressure multiplies. Veterans in the locker room wouldn't care about last names, they'd care about winning, about fairness, about whether the quarterback is truly the best option or just the most protected one, and if results slip even slightly, doubt spreads fast. One bad loss turns into noise. 2 bad games turn into controversy. And 1 losing streak turns into a circus. For the son, it's even heavier. Every mistake wouldn't just be his, it would reflect on his father. Every success would be discounted. People wouldn't say he earned it, they'd say he was handed it. That kind of weight breaks players who aren't prepared. But here, what complicates the narrative? Shedeur Sanders has been carrying that weight his entire life. He's never played a down without being compared, doubted, or dissected. He's never had the luxury of anonymity. Pressure isn't new to him, it's familiar. And that's exactly why his father believes this environment doesn't weaken him, it sharpens him. Still, belief doesn't erase reality. The NFL is unforgiving. Results matter immediately. There's no grace period for experiments, no patience for emotional stories. If this pairing works, it becomes historic. If it fails, it becomes a cautionary tale told for generations. And that's the risk no one can downplay. Because once this line is crossed, there's no separating father from coach anymore. Only wins can do that. Strip away the headlines, the last name, and the arguments, and the picture changes fast. Because the version of Shedeur Sanders most people argue about isn't the one that actually exists on the field. For the last few years, he's played under conditions that would have broken most quarterbacks. One of the weakest offensive lines in college football, constant pressure, hit after hit, week after week, and all of it happening under a microscope most players never experience. Every throw analyzed, every mistake magnified, every success explained away. And yet he never cracked. No public complaints, no sideline tantrums, no excuses in post-game interviews. He absorbed punishment, got back up, and kept leading. That matters more than highlight clips ever will, especially at the next level. Critics love to say he's only where he is because of his father, but that argument ignores one uncomfortable truth. Being Deion Sanders' son doesn't make things easier, it makes everything heavier. The expectations are higher, the patience is thinner, and the margin for error is non-existent. Most young quarterbacks struggle just adjusting to NFL speed. Shedeur has been adjusting to judgment his entire life. That's why those who know him talk less about arm strength and more about composure, less about flash and more about processing. He doesn't panic, he doesn't rush, he doesn't let chaos speed him up. Those are traits you can't teach once the lights come on. Still, doubt refuses to disappear. People question whether he's a system product, whether he's been protected, whether he can succeed without his father nearby, and every incomplete pass becomes proof for those waiting to be right. Deion addressed that narrative directly when he said people keep trying to turn Shedeur into someone else instead of accepting who he already is. That wasn't blind defense. It was a statement about identity, about embracing the pressure instead of running from it. Because being a Sanders isn't just about name recognition. It's about expectation, accountability, and a belief that pressure is a privilege, not a burden. Shedeur didn't arrive at this moment by accident. He's been built for it mentally, emotionally, and strategically. That doesn't guarantee success. Nothing in the NFL does. But it explains why those closest to the situation aren't surprised by his calm when everything around him feels unstable. And it explains why some inside Cleveland are starting to see something others still refuse to acknowledge. That this isn't a kid being protected. It's a quarterback who's been preparing for this exact chaos his entire life. And the real test is only beginning. This is where the story started to shift from curiosity to controversy. Because belief is one thing, public confidence is another. And when Deion Sanders speaks with certainty, it doesn't land quietly, it challenges people. After everything unfolded, he didn't hedge, he didn't soften his stance. He didn't play the cautious game coaches usually play when talking about young quarterbacks. Instead, he doubled down. He made it clear that in his eyes, his son belongs at the top of the conversation, not near it, not eventually, right now. That's the part that rubbed people the wrong way. Around the league, comparisons are sacred. Scouts spend years debating prospects, splitting hairs over footwork, arm angles, and decision speed. So when Deion openly suggested that other highly regarded quarterbacks wouldn't separate themselves from Shedeur, it felt like a challenge to the entire evaluation system. And it didn't come from arrogance alone. It came from study. He's watched the film, he's broken down the mechanics, he's seen how quickly decisions are made under pressure, and he believes the gap people assume exists simply isn't there. That belief carries weight because it comes from someone who's evaluated talent at the highest level, both as a player and as a coach. But confidence like that creates friction. To critics, it sounded like bias, like a father protecting his son, like hype designed to control the narrative. They questioned whether he could truly separate pride from evaluation, and every strong statement only fueled their skepticism. That's the paradox of this situation. If Deion stayed quiet, people would assume doubt. If he speaks confidently, they call it favoritism. There's no safe middle ground. Yet, from his perspective, silence would be dishonest. He's never built his career on shrinking back, and he knows something others don't: how his son prepares when no cameras are around, how he processes pressure, how he responds when things go wrong. Still, confidence doesn't guarantee outcomes. The NFL has humbled far more talented players than this. Belief doesn't stop defenses from adjusting, and it doesn't protect quarterbacks from mistakes. But here's what it does do. It forces the conversation to change. Suddenly, Shedeur isn't just a developmental piece anymore. He's a question mark teams can't ignore. A player whose future is now tied to a much larger debate about evaluation, opportunity, and trust. And once that debate starts, it stops being about projections. It becomes about decisions. Decisions Cleveland may be closer to making than anyone realizes. At first glance, the idea of Deion Sanders leaving what he's built feels unrealistic. Colorado gave him full control, a national platform, the freedom to build culture his way. He turned a dormant program into one of the most talked about teams in the country almost overnight. He recruits at a level few expected. He wins, and he's become more than a coach, he's the face of the program. So why walk away from that? The answer lies in something Deion has never hidden. He's a competitor first. Everything else comes second. College success is meaningful, but the NFL is the ultimate proving ground. It's where legacies are finalized, not debated. And despite everything he's accomplished, there's one thing still missing from his resume: winning as a head coach at the highest level. If Deion truly believes he can build a winning NFL culture and develop a quarterback into a long-term franchise leader, there may be no challenge more tempting, especially when that quarterback is his son. From his perspective, this wouldn't be about comfort, it would be about alignment. The NFL offers something college never can: a single, unified mission, no recruiting battles, no roster turnover every year, no outside agendas pulling the locker room in different directions. Imagine stepping into a franchise where the vision is locked in from the top down. A coaching staff chosen specifically for one system, an offense built around one quarterback's strengths, no internal politics, no developmental guessing games. Just clarity. For Cleveland, that clarity is exactly what's been missing. But the risk is enormous. Deion has never coached an NFL roster, managing veteran egos, navigating the salary cap, making decisions that affect players who have already earned millions. That's a different world entirely. Many great college coaches never adjust to it. And then there's the pressure. Every loss would be louder, every mistake would be magnified. The media wouldn't wait for progress. They'd demand results immediately. And if things went sideways, the fallout wouldn't just hit Cleveland, it would follow both Sanders for the rest of their careers. That's why this moment feels so heavy. Because if it works, it becomes historic. A father and son proving that legacy and leadership can coexist at the highest level. A franchise reborn through belief instead of fear. And if it fails, it becomes a warning about ego, about overreach, about mistaking attention for answers. This isn't just a coaching decision. It's a gamble that could define how both men are remembered. And the clock is already ticking. Now it comes down to a single moment that could flip the entire conversation overnight. Not a season, not a playoff run, one game, one opportunity, one stretch of real NFL snaps where nothing is theoretical anymore. If the starting quarterback can't clear protocol, Shedeur Sanders is expected to step in. And suddenly, everything people have been arguing about from a distance becomes real. No protection from labels, no patience from critics. Just the field, the defense across from him, and the weight of a franchise watching closely. This is where stories are rewritten fast. If he goes out and looks composed, if he moves the offense, limits mistakes, and shows command, Cleveland's internal conversations shift immediately. What once sounded like speculation starts feeling logical. A late-round pick turns into a potential long-term answer. A chaotic situation turns into opportunity. And the idea of building around him stops being controversial and starts feeling necessary. That's how quickly things change in the NFL. One solid performance doesn't make a career, but it changes leverage, it changes timelines. It changes how bold an organization is willing to be. And if he struggles, then the doubt explodes. Every critic feels validated, every whisper about pressure being too much gets louder, the narrative hardens, and suddenly the idea of reshaping a franchise around him feels reckless again, not because he failed, but because the league has never been patient with young quarterbacks thrown into chaos. That's the danger of moments like this. They don't leave room for context. They don't account for preparation time or circumstance. They simply record the outcome and move on, and that's exactly why this game matters so much more than the stat line suggests. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just auditioning for snaps. He's auditioning for belief. Belief from teammates deciding whether to rally around him. Belief from coaches deciding how to plan the future. Belief from executives deciding how bold they're willing to be. And looming over all of it is the knowledge that this performance won't exist in isolation. Every throw will be tied back to his last name. Every reaction will be interpreted through a much larger story that's already forming. This is the moment his entire life has been preparing him for. Not because it guarantees success, but because it demands clarity. By the end of that game, one thing will be true. Either this conversation slows down, or it accelerates faster than anyone expected. And once it accelerates, there's no stopping what comes next. This is bigger than one team, one coach, or one quarterback. What's unfolding sits at the intersection of tradition and disruption, and the NFL doesn't like standing there for long. The league has always sold itself as a meritocracy. Earn your spot, prove it on the field, keep personal ties out of the equation. And yet, history shows that the biggest shifts never come from playing it safe. They come from moments exactly like this. A franchise backed into a corner, a player stepping into pressure before the league thinks he's ready, and a coach whose very presence forces uncomfortable questions about how football power actually works, not on paper, but in reality. If Cleveland goes down this road, they're not just betting on talent, they're betting on alignment, on belief, on the idea that culture can matter as much as scheme and leadership can matter as much as pedigree. They're betting that the right voice can stabilize chaos where decades of conventional thinking failed. But that bet cuts both ways. If it works, the league has to reckon with what it's ignored for years. That development isn't linear. That pressure doesn't break everyone. That family legacy, when handled correctly, doesn't weaken a locker room, it can unify it. And that might force teams everywhere to rethink how they evaluate quarterbacks, coaches, and the human side of this sport. If it fails, the NFL will retreat instantly. This story will be filed away as proof that some lines shouldn't be crossed. That tradition exists for a reason, and that trying to rewrite the rules comes at a cost few are willing to pay. That's why this moment matters so much. Because the league is watching, owners are watching, front offices are watching. They may not say it publicly, but they're paying attention to every snap, every quote, every reaction. Not to judge personalities, but to assess risk. And the truth is, the NFL has always been shaped by risk-takers, by people willing to challenge norms when the old answers stopped working. Sometimes those risks created dynasties, sometimes they created disasters. Right now, nobody knows which direction this one goes. All that's clear is this: the status quo isn't as untouchable as it once was, and once doubt creeps in, change follows. Whether this story becomes a blueprint or a warning hasn't been decided yet. But one thing is certain: the league is standing at a crossroads, and the next decision made won't just affect Cleveland. It could quietly reshape the future of professional football.